I'm not sure whether this actual next conversation is more about Chloe on Guyon Espiner's show, or it's more about Guyon Espiner's show and how the media actually is pretty terrible. Because at the start of the show, I explained, it seems to me that often the media are looking for an answer. I wouldn't call it a gotcha, but maybe a binary, a yes or a no, a right or wrong. And I'll give the example, and I think it's the perfect example of Gary's economics, Gary Stevenson, isn't it? When he went on Piers Morgan, and he just goes, "No, I'm rich, I'm sorted. It's our kids that'll pay." And he was talking about changing the tax rates, tax wealth, not work, etc., etc. And I think it might have been Dave Rubin. Why they put Dave Rubin on as an expert, God only knows. But Dave Rubin and Piers Morgan were both going, "Well, you give your money away. I don't give my money away. You give your own money away if you want to do it." And the point was really clear. And maybe it was really clear to me for the first time, which is a bit embarrassing. But it's like, the point that Gary was making was, whatever, okay, if I give my money away, how does that change the system? So in other words, one part of the argument wanted to get him into a binary, which was, well, if you think people should give their money away, then give your money away. Well, he was like, well, if I give my money away, that's not going to change the system. We need systematic change. And I guess it's a bit like, these in America, progressive, like, for example, there was some criticism over AOC and Bernie Sanders taking a private jet to I think it was an Idaho rally, because they're these green people, but it's like the reason they took a private jet was there were no commercial planes that went to that airport, so they didn't actually have any other option. But the point being, they're trying to change the system, and sometimes to change a system, you have to work within the system to do it. And then getting in a car and driving 12 hours rather than a private jet to an airport because they'd done another rally that day, which took an hour. They're there to try and change the system. It's a little bit like we always say, anecdotal evidence is singular, is one, right? But data or research, as we want to look at, people seem to want to pull out the anecdotal evidence, the singular story. Well, why don't you give your money away rather than look at the data, which is more like the broader how we change everything? Anyway, I got the sense of that from watching this today as well. We're going to talk a little bit about what they're talking about as well. But yeah, Guyon wants singular answers where nuance is needed. It was also a strange start to this conversation. He started talking to her about AI, and I mean, something interesting came from it. She said, we have a policy that no Green Party member is allowed to use AI to write their speeches. And that is actually quite interesting, right? Okay. But it was such a random first up question. Let's talk about AI. Like, when have we ever had access to a leader of a party? And that will be the first question of the conversation. And then he went back. And I'm quite disappointed with Guyon in this. I think that this is a very average interview. And as I said, almost like trying to back someone into a corner, but Chloe's too good for that. She's just like, well, she actually says at one stage, I'm not going to give you the headline you want. Let's have a listen.
Yeah. You intimated there that you don't support the ban on under 16. Is that what you're feeling?
So he wants a yes or no. Do you support the ban, yes or no?
I think that
this is social media ban for under 16, obviously.
Yeah, it is.
You don't support that?
I think that we need to be having the bigger conversation. And I worry that if we are fixated solely on young people, then it feels akin to the conversation around the moral panic with young people in their MTV 20, 30, 40 years ago. Yes, of course, we are seeing disproportionate impacts for young people using social media. But we also have some pretty alarming research around isolation and older people's use of social media.
So you reckon it's... So can I get a clear answer? Do you support the under 16 ban or not?
I think that it's unsophisticated and I'd like to see it investigated further.
So you don't
Well, I don't support a sledgehammer. I support us having a proper evidence-based, rational discussion about how we actually rein in these platforms, because it's the platforms that are the issue. Multi-billionaires do not have the interest.
Yeah, this is a really good answer. But the point is, with Guyon, he wants her to say yes or no. And even I know that this is where we sit politically. I'm not defending Chloe. If you don't believe us, go back to Monday's show. But the reality is, I don't know if I can support this because we haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the legislation. Let's see it. Let's look at the data, what the research says, and then I'll give you an answer. But he won't take it. He wants a yes or no. And I'm frustrated with that in the media in general.
Yeah. Of regular people at heart when they are
rigging
these algorithms.
Kick their kids off them.
Well, exactly. And they're rigging these algorithms to produce greater outrage and polarization, which is detrimental to our democracy. And you only need to look at the impact that that's having not only on our partisan politics, but also at our media landscape. And that's what's concerning to me.
So a little example of, I'll play you another clip now. We're going to keep rolling into it, where he is talking and the same sort of thing. He basically talks about James Shaw said basically any progress on climate change is worth working with anyone. And again, he's going, well, would you work with National? Yes or no? Would you work with National? Yes or no? Would you work with National? Yes or no? And I know what I'd say if someone asked me that. Like, okay, Pat, would you go work for that Canadian guy, the new guy who's running News Talk ZB, the billionaire? My answer would be, well, let's talk about what that means, not yes or no. It's like, well, I don't know. Can I bring my little friend along with me? What does it look like? How many out? What is it's not a yes or no. Would you work with National? Yes or no? Yes or no? Hey, if you're wondering, sure, you're my little friend. That's what I'm saying. You're my little friend. Here we go.
I want to talk a little bit about political strategy and how the Greens have tied themselves to Labor pretty much exclusively in recent years. James Shaw did an exit interview with us here on 30, where he talked about how getting gains on climate change should be more important than the backlash the Greens could face if, say, they went with National. Do you agree with that?
I mean, there's a lot in that question. The first thing would be, I mean, is the National Party actually willing to properly wake up to and admit that the climate crisis is a real thing?
But we're not going to answer that question here today. I'm after your strategic calculus here. Is making gains on climate change more important than the backlash you would get from members if you said, hey, we're considering going with National? So
if she says yes, the headline the next day on RNZ is Chloe pledges to work with National. If she says no, the headline the next day on RNZ is Chloe won't do anything to fix climate change. I'm just really disappointed that this is an RNZ product. I mean, anywhere that doesn't need to get clickbait stuff, it's RNZ. It's long form. I mean, it's not that long form, it's 30 minutes, but it doesn't need to be down this. Would you do it or would you not? I mean, the other thing I realized when watching something the other day, I can't remember which interview it was. Anyway, it was some terrible interview on the internet, is they kept on doing these hypotheticals like this. Would you work with National? Well, not this national government, but like some national government in the future that gets taken over by
that's
an environmental.
Good answer.
But you know what I mean?
That's a great answer.
But it's this hypothetical.
This national government.
Yeah, you're asking me to commit to this thing. We don't know what they want to do. We don't know where they're going to say. We don't know who's going to lead it. We don't know what their co-popper is. Yeah, but it's a yes or no. Can we have a yes or no, please?
I mean, I've always been transparent about, and the Greens have always been transparent about how we will work with anyone to progress kaupapa that is important to the well-being of people and planet. I, for example, am currently working across the aisle with Minister Simon Watts on climate adaptation legislation.
Yeah, sure. But when it comes to coalition agreement...
Yeah, sure. I get all that kind of nuance. But I want a yes or no. Just can we put the nuance off to the side?
With Minister Simon Watts on climate adaptation legislation.
Yeah, sure. But when it comes to coalition agreements and coalition deals, we're going to be in this position next year, aren't we? You've always ruled out working.
Yeah, so we'll talk about it next year when we know the lie of the land for us. You want me to commit to something that we're talking about? You're saying in 12 months from now, this will be a conversation, eh? Yep. So what would you do about that right now? Well, I'll tell you in 12 months. Sorry, Judy, you going to say me?
Why is this a question like, long form, 30 minutes, 30 real world minutes, not BHN minutes where they're four times longer.
Because 30 minutes is not an hour.
He's burned out time on this dumbass question.
Yeah.
Like, you've answered it, Pat. Why would they work with a party that is fundamentally incompatible with what the Greens want to get done? There's no acknowledgement of climate crisis. There's no acknowledgement of any of the things that the Greens find important. Like, say tomorrow a series of lightning bolts hit everybody in the National Party, and they're suddenly replaced by someone or a group of people that are like, we acknowledge that climate change is an existential crisis that we need to move on now, and we also acknowledge what a fantastic way to make a lot of money. Like, we need to jump wholeheartedly into these things. We can save the planet. We can also make money because we're the party of business. We know they're not, but, lightning. At that point, I would say expect that the Greens go, aha, here's something we can work with. But at the moment, the question is moot because there's nothing to advance what the Greens want to advance. Hey, Guyon said here that they have lashed themselves to Labour. That's their only option. There's no other party. And I think that is the problem that they have, is that Labour can safely sort of go, well, you have to go with us. The thing is, they don't. And that is where the Greens party has its power, is that they can go, well, I guess we're not part of the government. It's a big call.
Yeah, I actually don't.
Big hammer.
But I don't agree with them either. They're not lashed to Labour. If anyone's going to go, this doesn't work for us, it's going to be the Greens and Te Pāti Māori.
They've done that. They've done that before.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing with this line of questioning from Guyon, is it starts with a false premise, and then it doesn't get any better from there.
I'm just having a look to see if Guyon's been nominated for an award at the.
Yeah, I'll ask him in person.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. I can't see one.
I'll formulate my question now while you're looking.
Okay.
Maybe if I could start with, what the fuck, Guyon?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's some people in the chat saying that they never leave it. Guyon's a good journalist. This just feels weird. This actually feels off.
I like some stuff he's done. This is not it.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the end of this clip, because
coalition deals, we're going to be in this position next year, aren't we? You've always ruled out working with National in government. Is that your position today as you sit here?
I mean, I don't think I'm unfortunately going to give you a tidy headline on this. What I am going to say is we don't know what the National Party is going into the next election with, but what we can reflect on is that right now they are knowingly shredding climate action. A third of their emissions reduction policies relied on unproven carbon capture technology, which is now, as of today, being proven to fall through the gaps. It's not going to be feasible. It's not realistic. So as soon as the National Party wake up to the science and the reality of climate change, of course we'll be able to have those kinds of conversations.
But you see, if you are open to working with Labour and National, then you can get a coalition deal. Look at what Winston Peters and David Seymour have managed to get out of National, quite considerable gains that weren't on their table. So if
I can put it really, really clearly, we are willing to work with anyone when it comes to progressing the kaupapa that is necessary for upholding the well-being of people and planet. So sure, if the National Party were to completely U-turn on their callous, cruel cuts to climate, to science, to people's well-being, of course we'd be open to working with them. But we're currently doing that right now. And you only need to look at Marama's Right to Repair Bill that's been passing through the House, Te Anoa's Western Samoa Citizenship Bill. We have been doing that work.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you are prepared to work with National and government, potentially.
Fucking hell.
Jesus
Ninth time the same question. She just answered you 7 times.
Well, but I think they'd have to be quite a demonstrably different party from the one that is right now shredding progress on climate change and actively kicking the boot into some of the poorest New Zealanders.
So there you go. Not this lot. Is basically what she did say, Chewie, in the end.
Perfect answer. Not this National Party.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So people were questioning why we were playing that. Both. I don't know why I felt like it's time to highlight the media. But that revelation for me from Gary's Economics was probably only in the last 6 months. And I'm like, I've been working in this world for including music radio and stuff since the 1990s. So, cause I'm really old. So it's like, I'm losing the will to live. It's not the right way to say that. It's not the right way to say that.
Hey,
I'm losing patience because we had Marama for 55 minutes last week. We had Tanya for about the same tonight. We do get access. We don't get as easy access as some of these mainstream media, and it just annoys me it felt like a banal interview from Guyon's side. So yeah, it was a waste. Chloe was great, and like that's why I wanted to show the answers as well, because she nailed it, absolutely nailed it, which is good to get back on the horse after Q&A being a little bit iffy. But yeah, so I'm frustrated. Guyon's better than that. And I just also then have to start to wonder, Occam's razor says the fewest numbers of assumptions to get to a conclusion. What are the assumptions here? Are they being told under this government, you need to push harder, you need to get more listeners, more ears, you have to be, maybe they wouldn't use these words, but you have to be a bit more clickbaity. It's like, even after you've answered the question 3 times, you get the same question again. It's like, because what happens, and just so you guys know, what happens when you're at a stand-up is a reporter will ask you the same question 4 times because they will want a specific answer, and they'll get you answering that question 4 different ways, and then they'll pick the one they want for the article. Now, this is a bit different because it's we'll put air quotes around long form, shall we? And our what are we now? Our 99th minute right now. But it's long form compared to others, but it's not 30 minutes goes by like that. You don't have all the time in the world. Anyway, Chewie, I'll leave Guyon alone.
Yeah, I'm going to give him some
like
grace
Chloe should have.
T-shirt buddies. I noticed he's wearing a She Hard T-shirt like I've got. So there we go. Look, I think that. Well, hang on. Form my thoughts, then verbalize them.
You're such a good orator. I learned from you, Chewie.
One of the things that we set up BHN to do was to comment on the media. Remember back in the start?
Yeah, it was the critiquers of the critiquers. Commentators of the commentators. Yeah.
That's when there was more media out
yes,
there.
True. That's very true. Bloody these media outlets keep shutting down to make our job harder.
Yeah.
No, we would critique the people critiquing. You're 100% right. That was one of the things we used to say.
And look, I also, one of the other things that we said is it is hard to have a longer period of time with some of these important political figures so you can get context and nuance. So here we have a 30-minute show that is not 90 minutes, which is a shame, where he was doing that thing where he's just re-asking the same question, and it's like, no, bitch, that's it. Next question.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder
if
sometimes.
you can't get it out of her, you can't get it out of her.
I do wonder sometimes.
But if you're
why
asking
politicians,
a dumb question, you're just not going to get it.
I mean, I do wonder sometimes why politicians don't just go asked and answered next. You know what I mean? It's like, because you have interesting. Daniel mentions the genesis of the podcast was to get, quote, straight answers from the interviewees, end quote.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this interview isn't the best example of what this podcast is about. Well, let's be gracious and say we'll have a look next week or the next couple of weeks at other episodes, and you know, everyone has an off day. Maybe this was an off day, and let's be generous this time around. We'll see.